The Change Officer Podcast's Future of Financial Services series is brought to you by Holy Wallet, the world's first wallet-as-a-service platform. Stay tuned to find out how Holy Wallet can help you build your mobile wallet to increase revenue and reduce time to market.
Customers are moving, patterns are changing, and it is moving towards more and more convenience, more and more frictionless payments in the individual space. We saw the shift away to tap and go, as you rightly mentioned. And then we obviously see the NFC-enabled payments, which was your Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay taking over. And I personally feel future is not far away, where you probably don't even need a physical device to make payments. It might be biometric driven, it might be face driven, and that's not very far. From my perspective, that is going to be a future where it'll be frictionless. It's just that we'll have to see in terms of the adoption and the pacing at which it takes over. But that's definitely the future trend that would emerge.
Welcome to the Change Officer Podcast's Future of Financial Services series. In this series, we are deep diving into some of the hottest and most pivotal topics in the financial services industry right now, including personalization in financial services, embedded finance, and the mobile payment revolution. Join us as we seek the answers to critical questions such as what does the future hold for the financial services sector and where should we look for the next big disruptive idea. Contactless payments soared during the height of pandemic, and with customers everywhere demanding greater convenience and more frictionless payment experience, industry experts believe we are not far from witnessing the introduction of biometric payments and other methods that negate the need of physical device entirely. Today, we are speaking to Hiren Raghuvanshi, the head of cards, payments and direct banking at the Commercial Bank of Dubai. Hiren has more than 15 years of retail banking experience in the fields of product development and digital and retail growth strategy, amongst many others. Hiren dived into what needs to take place for biometric and facial recognition-based payments to become mainstream. He also touched on the main customer concerns about moving to completely cashless payment methods and the next critical steps for banks to embrace a cashless economy. Ready to discover where the next big opportunity in the payment sector lies? Let's jump right in and find out. Enjoy. Welcome to the Change Officer, Hiren.
Thank you, Vuk.
Thank you for taking the time. I'm happy to have you on this special series on the future of financial services. You've been in this industry for a while. We can call it a veteran. I want to explore a couple of topics here, and we're going to dive straight into it. Number one, payments. A lot has been talked and written about payment evolution, payment revolution. Across emerging market and MENA, we are still highly dependent on cash, I would say. In B2B as well, we have checks still being used, cash heavily consumed as well. Now, COVID and pandemic did accelerated the process of switching more towards cashless economy. But what do you see as a couple of major trends going forward, moving more towards cashless economy?
So I think before we get into future, it'll be good to just do a bit of retro study on what has happened to us. So if you were to see in terms of payments, there are two key verticals. One is the consumers, the individuals. And second for me is the entities or the corporate stroke SMEs. In the individual space, we've definitely seen significant acceleration and change in patterns. So if I was to give you some stats, so earlier the cash transactions in this particular vertical was the digital payments were sub 20%. And then that's now trending close to a 50%, obviously accelerated due to the readiness of the market and more also from a pandemic perspective. Within that, I think there are sub-patterns which are emerging. So one is the card not present and card present. So there are a lot of transactions which have now shifted from card present to card not present. Again, from a stats perspective, if I was to give you some numbers, this was trending at a sub 20% where people were using card not present, and that's now trending close to a 50 to a 60%. In fact, during pandemic, it peaked at 70%. Naturally so, because most of the outside world was locked and people were using more and more e-com transactions. And within that space as well, if I was to see the contactless transactions, that also has an emerging trend, which was earlier trending close to a 30%, is now trending at a 70%. So clearly customers are moving patterns are changing, and it is moving towards more and more convenience, more and more frictionless payments in the individual space. There's a way to go when it talks about businesses and entities, as you rightly mentioned, but I do feel that as well in the due course will be changing and the patterns will emerge where fintechs and the banks will collaborate. And of course, the infrastructure support and the regulatory support will enable and act as a catalyst to drive more.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And I agree fully. Now, although numbers are growing at a very rapid rate when it comes to moving towards contactless payments, it is still predominantly tap and go rather than mobile wallets, for example. Have you seen maturity in this space and some bigger leaps, or it's still just incremental growing?
So I think it's definitely customer driven. If you were to see from an evolution perspective, we were earlier dependent on physical cards and swiping those while doing the transactions. We saw the shift away to tap and go, as you rightly mentioned. And then we obviously see the NFC enabled payments, which was your Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay taking over. And I personally feel future is not far away where you probably don't even need a physical device to make payments. It might be biometric driven, it might be face driven, and that's not very far. From my perspective, that is going to be a future where it'll be frictionless. It's just that we'll have to see in terms of the adoption and the pacing at which it takes over. But that's definitely the future trend that would emerge.
But I think that's an interesting topic to unpack a little bit. How do you see that whole space evolve, and how far are we from it? What needs to happen so we actually, walk into a store and using facial recognition, we pay for the products purchased?
So I think for that, there are a couple of things if I was to see, right? So one is technology readiness, both at the end of the merchant who's going to accept the payments. There's also going to be a readiness at the issuing side of business where the issuing banks are ready with the biometric capabilities where they can store the information to authenticate. So definitely a technology dependency, that will be point number one. And number two would be the adoption. So what is going to drive it for this to spread, both at the customer end and at the receiving end of merchant. So both will be something that is to be seen, but definitely see that as a space of innovation coming in next in the payment space.
Talking about adoption, what have you learned so far about consumers when it comes to adoption? What are the number 1 to 3 concerns they have when switching from a cash to a different method of payment?
So usually it's around the security. Yeah. So I mean, obviously there is the initial concern. I think pre-pandemic was more about the feel of having the cash, giving it away. The challenges were around the security element, the frauds element. But I think what has happened over a period of time is we have seen further investments and enhancements in the security element. While the concerns are still there, frauds will still happen. However, I think what is also happening is the ability of the institutions to combat that, mitigate that through enhanced security and risk parameters been in place.
Hey everyone, sorry for jumping in. We'll be back with the rest of the conversation shortly, but I wanted to take a moment to thank the sponsor of our show, Holy Wally. Within the next 2 years, 4 billion people will be using digital wallets, and the global mobile payments market size is expected to hit US $5.5 billion by 2024. It's more important than ever for financial service providers to offer a digital wallet service to their customers. Enter Holy Wally, the world's first wallet-as-a-service platform that allows any financial service provider to build their own digital wallet as efficiently and cost-effectively as possible. Whether you're a fintech, retailer, banking institution, or insurance carrier, Holy Wally has all the elements you need to build your own company's ideal digital wallet in a matter of minutes and manage it on an ongoing basis. To find out how Holy Wally can increase your customer engagement and revenue, or to register for a demo, visit hollywally.com. The link can be found in the show notes of this episode, and now enjoy the rest of this conversation. And for the banking sector, what do you see as the couple of critical next steps in embracing this new cashless economy?
So I think from a bank's perspective, the key element is going to be its model to distribution, right? So what's happening is there are more and more big techs where the customers are today enrolling as a touch point. So I personally feel banks would be looking into the opportunity of partnering with them and literally becoming like an invisible bank where you, for example, you might just log into Amazon, which is your frequent touch point, and you might have something powered by a bank at the back end. So from that perspective, I think a distribution reach, which would be, because that's where the patterns are going, where consumers are shifting. When did you last go shopping for a banking product? I'm sure that's not one of the things that is on the top of your list, but I'm sure you're visiting Amazon very frequently and any others, these e-com transactions. So I personally feel as a critical path would be the banks to realize these potential partnerships, and literally act as banking as a service for them and for the customers.
Also, or embedded banking as it's recognized, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think embedded banking is one topic also very interesting and worth covering. And it has been, we've seen examples of embedded banking even in the region globally, of course. Where do you see the biggest or the quickest return or results in embedded banking as a field and area?
So again, from my point of view, it's all about in terms of the touch points. So what are the most visited touch points from a customer perspective? Second is the velocity and the underlying product that touch point is selling or offering. And obviously linked to that is how can banks partner in such situations by financing or by giving innovative finance products to the customers and add more value to the underlying distributor itself. Sure.
All right, switching gears a bit. There's a topic that has been less talked about and the segment that has been underserved, which is B2B payments. And traditionally they've been underserved. There's multiple reasons. Most of the disruption and fintechs have been focused on consumers, right? So when we talk about B2B payments, what do you see as a couple of key trends that will shape this space?
So definitely it is untapped when it comes to digitizing the payments. A lot of stuff is still happening on cash and check, completely agreed. However, I think that's where I see this as an opportunity space. So fintechs, I personally feel in collaboration with banks, can definitely disrupt and translate most of these cashless payments into digital. Of course, this is going to evolve. It will require regulatory support. It will require revisions in pricing probably. It will require a thought process on how we're going to drive adoption. So I think all these coupled together are going to be critical for us to move this cash into digital.
So if we were to talk about some major opportunities in this space, where do you see, as everyone knows who's following Change Officer so far, we're always trying to answer that question, what's that big change ahead? If I were to ask you, where do you see the biggest opportunity in the future that is worth pursuing or solving at this stage? Or if you would have another 8 hours of your day, where would you put your efforts in? What problem would you try to solve?
So I think just alluding to the previous point that we spoke about, I think payments is all about converting first cash to digital, and within digital then driving higher wallet share. So if I was to just focus on the first point, which is the vertical where today transactions are happening in cash and how can we convert them into digital? So definitely a space in the B2B, as you mentioned. In fact, I would say it's not just B2B, it's B2C as well, right? So there are multiple opportunities in that space which transactions are still in cash. So that's one leg. Second, I think in the individual space, while a lot of disruptions already happen, but there are a lot of exciting stuff which is still yet to happen. So just to allude to that, obviously we spoke about the biometric payments. Yeah. We don't know what Meta brings to us, right? So if it's going to be a virtual world, people buying things, there will be a requirement for payments. So that'll be an interesting space. So I'm definitely eyes on in terms of what can be done. And I think it's going to be the first mover advantage.
I think it's a very interesting space to explore and talk about is Meta. Something that has been all over the news, obviously, and LinkedIn over the last couple of months. How do you see Meta or how do you see payments manifested in Meta? What would be the way and what would be the currencies used?
Yeah, I think pretty much interesting and unknown at this stage. But, I myself have been reading quite a bit on Meta. From a use case perspective, it's going to be several. So it's going to be in the space of travel. It's going to be in the space of entertainment. It's going to be in the space of real estate and much more. Have
you bought any real estate in Meta?
Well, to be honest, I have.
Wow.
So I know. It's just the curiosity in me which made me do that. But I'm pretty much, because see, in all these cases there will be a requirement of payment. So there will be exchange of services, exchange of goods, and stuff like that. And obviously the currencies might not be limited to what we are known to. We might be then looking into crypto. So I think all that at this moment is unknown, and it's interesting as we go ahead and how this shapes up. but definitely something to watch out for.
Hiren, thanks a lot for coming on The Change Officer.
It's my pleasure, Rook.
Thank you for sharing your insights. Everyone, hope you enjoyed this quick episode with Hiren. Stay tuned. There is another one coming out very soon. Thank you.